Mr. Deng Chuanheng is founder and managing partner of Interactive Technology Private Limited. He is also IT advisor at APARA, Singapore Agape Village. So welcome back, Chuan, to share on. He will be sharing on recommendations for ethical and responsible approach to AI in Singapore and the region.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Okay, again, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is a really wonderful occasion, and I'm really thrilled to share this slides with all of you. I kind of feel that after Alessandro's and Olivia's presentation, I'm going to build on what they have mentioned. And both presentation has been really excellent. It has cleared so many thinkings. And I'm going to try and incorporate some of the knowledge that I have learned from their presentation into my presentation so that you can see the holistic view of this important topic, which is ethical and responsible AI. So, we all know this. I think this is one of the most prominent caricature of a dystopia outcome due to AI run amok. If you guys are familiar with this concept of singularity, Skynet is what singularity is to become if there are no ethical boundaries to control what AI can or cannot do. So then we ask the question, why does AI need to have moral agency? If we reflect upon ourselves as human beings, ethics is a strategic, and it is the essence of living with your fellow human beings. Without it, you have massacre, you have all sorts of catastrophe over the history of humanity. So the importance of ethics or AI having moral agency lies in this question. And it is because AI has reached the level of autonomy where it has human level cognition. It can decide, it can act, it can learn. Now, as Dr. Alessandro has pointed out, now there's a difference between knowing and understanding. I've attended a philosophical class, and I don't think there is a clear difference between the two of knowing and understanding. But I think, and that's where I think the challenge is. Understanding ethics and knowing ethics are two different things. So machine knows 2 plus 2 is 4, but what is 4? What does 4 represents in the context of the real world? That's a different thing altogether, and it's different meaning. 4 has different meaning. Therefore, the context of understanding has another level to it, which I've not managed to differentiate yet. So, I also want to take this opportunity to differentiate between when we say moral agency and ethical principles, what are the difference? And from what I've found out is that morality tends to relate to the right and wrong according to our own personal or normative views. Personal. So, some classical contradiction between morals is someone may think that lying is absolutely wrong, while someone might think that lying for a good intention is morally right. So you have a contradiction between cross moral values between two people. Now, ethics is more of a declared right and wrong. Yeah, we have professional ethics standards, we have medical profession ethics, we have legal professional ethics, and so on. So ethics is more of a declared, and it's transparent, we know it, and from ethics and morals, we derive the laws that we establish in society. And again, ethics is also culturally sensitive. For example, in abortion may be legally right, but ethically it may be wrong within a group of people or religious group of people, and then morally it can have another sets of values. So in this context, I differentiate when I use the word moral and when I use the word ethics. So in this case, we use the word ethical AI, which means it's a declared, openly declared principles. But we are certain that this ethics is derived from the moral values that we learn from our from the years of growing up as a child and to adulthood. So next, so with that in mind, I realized that there are few areas of research that this fraternity of AI researchers and practitioners should think about. These are suggestions from a personal standpoint. And one of them is how to integrate ethical strategy based on applied philosophy, which is exactly what Olivia is doing. She is a philosopher by training, and she's now applying that thinking into the application of AI innovation. And I totally agree with Olivia that ethics do not impede innovation. In fact, it perfects innovation, because innovation has to achieve the purpose of goodness. And because it has to achieve the purpose of goodness, there has to be some boundaries. And these boundaries, because ethics is philosophically by nature, it is not possible to just use scientific methods to derive these values. No, it's impossible, right? Of course, when you go into these areas, you touch on some deep philosophical challenges like dualism and what have you. Next, how to differentiate between machine learning algorithms to train AI, to learn ethical principle. How do you teach machine ethical principles, if that's possible? Dr. Alexandro is clearly pointing out that ethics is not mathematical. A lie with a good intention is good by that definition. Next, how can machine learning learn cultural ethics and apply different AI and apply them differently under different cultural contexts? The good news here is, if you are building an AI system for a particular culture, it means that you can't really just apply it to another culture. And why is it a good news? Because then the big boys cannot dominate the entire scene of ethics. There are a lot of things in the scene of AI. There are a lot of things that needs to go into the discussion in order to build a good AI system. Okay, next area, how to perform audits. This is really in the area of explainable AI, and this is a major hot topic right now. Lots of investors are looking closely in this area. Next, can a central ethical framework be embedded into an AI system? I had this vision that, that there's this, say for example, I built this ethical framework and it learns all the ethics. And once it has learned all the ethics, it then combines with other AI systems. For example, a loan recommendation system. And when a decision is made, it sends to this central framework and it says yes or no. Ethics is a yes or no answer. It's either ethical or unethical. So if it is unethical, then how do you deal with this? And I think this is a very interesting concept in my mind, to see that if we have an overarching ethical framework which incorporates the legal aspect of it as well, to control the ethical outcomes of any AI decisions that works in the real world. And of course, with 5G, this is very possible. We know that 5G's response time is actually faster than the human response time between the muscles and the cognition capability. which is the speed of chemical electricity, bioelectricity. Next, can we push the mathematical models further to deal with ethics better? Moral mathematics, moral math. I searched. If you Google this term, you're probably going to hit one or two articles on this term. So it's not an area where I know from a Google standpoint, right? So again, Google might just want to show you what they want to show you rather than what is really out in the world. So and therefore we need to be careful of searching using Google. Personally, I don't use Google. I use DuckDuckGo, and I cross-check it with Google and see what I compare the searches to see how Google manages the algorithm against my preferences. And in that sense, we need to be able to think outside of algorithm. And this is really what one of the objective of my presentation today. Cultural considerations in ethics. Data used in machine learning must have cultural specific attributes, but we have to be careful between cultural attributes and attributes that can have racial connotation, sexist connotation, things that is deemed unethical in the particular culture. Test data, it must try to pick up these kind of cultural nuances within where the AI operates, and blend the cultural fabrics. The machine must blend into these cultural fabrics to function well. And ethical codes is kind of a passport for any autonomous beings. I shouldn't use the word being, or any autonomous entity to want to participate in society harmoniously. The fabric of society is bind together through a code of ethics, because the code of ethics is about right and wrong, and right and wrong helps us to work harmoniously with our fellow human beings. Now I want to share a story. We are in the process of designing what we call an AI sales coach. And while we were building this system, a few things hit my mind. And I was thinking, okay, let's build an ethical sales coach where the AI system is helping the salesperson to say the right thing, to help the buyers make a decision. This is in the context of real estate purchases. So we built a system where we have things like lead scoring, lead nurturing, interaction, chats, and so on. And the AI system is helping the salesperson to say the right thing, send the right message, ask the right questions, and learning. The algorithm is learning from the interaction. What does the buyer really need and want? So as I was designing this, I realized that there could be two types of sales coach. One that just focuses on really good experience in the context of what the buyer needs and wants to buy. And the other is really just disregard those and just focus on closing a deal. You can imagine the two outcomes are very dichotomized, a good and a bad outcome, right? One is a win-win outcome, the other one is a win-lose outcome. So I think in that sense, it is so important that the ethical consideration of designing something like this, and there are lots of these systems out there today, which I'm not sure if they have an ethical framework around it. So as I was designing this, I realized that the question of ethics cannot be an afterthought. It must be interweaved into the design, and it must be curbed as we talk about this, because when you paint out the journey of a buying journey, you have objections, you have buying signals, you have all sorts of information and emotions conjured and built up during the journey. And of course, algorithm can be built to take advantage of this information, and the buyer can fall prey to an AI system if it is not ethical. So it is really a wonderful experience having to design a system like this. And like what Olivia has mentioned, ethics is a differentiator. It's a very clear differentiator in terms of your products that you build. And it's long term. You have to look long term, right? Okay, now when we talk about ethics, we talk about values. And I want to share with you an article that was written by I, I, Ison Gabriel. He is from DeepMind, the folks who built the AlphaGo machine. And so he shared 6 value alignment approach. And I'm just going to read out to you here. First one is instruction. The agent does what I instruct it to do. Straightforward. Yeah. You tell the agent what you want it to do, it does it. No questions. Express intention. The machine learn what you want. What's your intention? Excuse me. And this is where it gets a bit tricky, because I want to allude to the point where Oliver mentioned about the conflicts of ethical values. I want to bring to mind the situation of, if you guys are familiar with Les Miserables, Jean Valjean stole the ornaments from the church. And the father says, no, he didn't steal it. I gave it to him. Now, is there a conflict? No, there's no conflict. Jean Valjean deemed it as stealing. Yes, he was wrong, but from the priest standpoint, no, he had intention to give it to him. So, and that intention cannot be detected by any machine. It is within our consciousness. No machine can read consciousness. So there you have the ethical dilemma. But at the roots of it, when the intention is honestly declared, then you will be able to decipher some of these ethical conflicts. I'm a bit of a purist and fundamentalist from an ethical standpoint, so you may disagree with me, and I would love to have a discourse with people who disagree, because that's where we can reveal the truth. Review preferences. So the machine learns from your behavior, what you prefer. That's things like reinforcement learning, learning different learning methods from data. Inform in preferences or desire. So the agent does what I would want it to do. So the machine starts to detect your intention. This is interesting, right? Because as what I mentioned earlier, the intention may be embedded in the data. So, and maybe the machine can pick some of these signals. And I think these things is going to just help us perfect our understanding of morals and ethics. And interest or well-being. So the agent does what is in my interest. So this is interesting, right? We actually do not know what's good for us, right? We drink lots of Coke, we eat lots of sweet stuff. Obesity is probably the second most highest cause of death. Worse than bullet is, worse than terrorism is. So be careful of sugar, right? Not be careful of bullets. Values. Okay, the agent does what it morally ought to do. Now, this last point, this last value alignment approach, for me, it is the answer to ethical issues, because it says morally ought to do. Now, the word ought is the essence of ethics. What you ought to do, that's the right way to do it, right? And the machine, hopefully, if we align the values correctly in this regard, it will execute the right action, right? And of course, again, if you take ethics from an absolute standpoint, right or wrong, then we may have an answer if we use this particular type of value alignment approach. Okay, so as I mentioned, are we over complicating stuff? Maybe, but but ethics is in the field of philosophy. Ethical studies in the field of philosophy, so it's moral. But by the way, philosophers do not differentiate between moral and ethics. But in this regard, really, can't we just use a algorithm that classify right and wrong? So ethics is really a classification problem. Just teach the machine what is right and wrong, and this machine will come up with the answers. Deep learning algorithm, we want to combine some of these algorithm, their legal compliance, their ideation, and all these things comes to this thing called the intelligence architecture. So, and very interestingly, if we combine all the learning algorithms, we call it the ensembling of learning models, then we can have a combination, right, of learning from data, deep neural networks, and just using some overarching principle to decide right and wrong. Oversimplifying things, but yeah. So then what are the challenges and limitations? Mathematical limitation, there's Kurt-Gödel's incompleteness theorem, there's Alan Turing's halting problem. And read this article if you want to know more about it. Hilary Putnam's article on minds and machine. Superly profound, but very deep in his thoughts. Interdisciplinary design approach, moral evolution. And I think this is where we may trip up, because moral values evolve over time. Slavery was not illegal in antiquity, but obviously now it's illegal. And I think really the major challenge is we want it our way. Human beings want it our way. We want our cake and eat it. So that's where the conflict is. And as I mentioned earlier, it is not impossible. It is not possible to design an ethical AI without contemplating the moral and ethical values. And because of this, we will get to know ourselves better. And at the end of it, I think the inevitability of AI dominance is going to be there. I think the question we have to ask is, how are we going to bring about, augment this process? And of course, how not to compromise our existential threat, the question of singularity. And really, fortunately, AI happens before quantum computing. Quantum computing, as some experts or technologists will say, is about 10 to 20 years down the road. Why do I say that? Because quantum computing has the power of superposition, which is the way human thinks. We hold concepts and thoughts in our head, and then when we combine them, there's a final outcome. And quantum computers are excellent in this regard. And AI functions in this. AI can function in this way, which it can't now without quantum computing. And when we combine the two, AI is going to take the whole level to a different echelon. So with that, I leave that as a question, whether this is going to be the next challenge. Hopefully, we understand the implication of ethics. Thank you very much, and hand over to you, Elle.
Thank you so much, Chuan. Everything is just really interesting. I have a feeling we are going to have a next session on AI, ethics and responsibility.